What's a small town dark secret you know? An extremely wealthy grandma had an affair with a pool boy. He called it quits and she accidentally ran him over and killed him. I don't remember if she actually caught a charge for it, but she didn't do any time. The family knows it was deliberate. Talks about it nonchalantly like, don't PSS grandma off. She ran over the last man that crossed her. Edit. Grammar. When I was a firefighter we had an arsonist in the city. They would walk around at night until they found a garage door that was left open. And then they'd start a fire in the garage. It did not matter if the residents were home or not. We had no leads other than it was a college student, as there was a discernible pattern of the fires stopping during winter and summer breaks. The police, fire department, and the highest levels of local government worked to keep the nature of fires a secret as they were worried about how it would impact the town's image. So, instead of telling people to close their ducking garage doors at night, nearly 20 families lost their homes. The arsonist was never caught, and presumably is still lighting fires in some other town. Growing up, our mayor had 2 teenage children and a baby. It was common knowledge the baby was the offspring of his 2 kids. It was just one of those things people didn't talk about. After he left office, his daughter gave birth to a kid by him as well. And no, I did not grow up in Alabama. Wait. The girl had a baby with both her brother and her dad? Roll Tide. The Devil House. Now, it had been around my hometown for decades. Enough different generations of kids had their own mythos. I had an English teacher that went to the same school in the late 80s. By then it was vacant but someone had painted a pentagram on the wall. You had to know where it was. Pull over on the old highway coming into town at a certain point. There was no driveway or anything, but you could see a gate if you knew where to look. Then you go into the woods a bit and bam, it almost appears out of nowhere on you. That's how well it was hidden. For the most part, every high school class would have a couple of people venture out to see it and leave their own small mark. Everyone was just sure Satanists or witches were meeting there occasionally. But later, I found out the real story from my dad. I'd asked him, but he didn't make the connection between that house's original purpose and the later myths until I showed him. The reason that hidden house was built was for a former wealthy farmer's lesbian daughter. Didn't have the heart to disown her, so he hid her away there in the late 60s. Because 60s. There were some wild parties out there and girls were converted to lesbianism. Read. Already knew damn well they were gay, so of course that small southern town assumed the devil was behind it. Small UK town. Man taken to hospital. Dies on arrival. Local news had announced that police were looking to speak to witnesses. Then announced police have upgraded it to a murder investigation. A few days later, some guys are arrested in connection to the case. A couple of months pass and they're sentenced to prison for murder. That's all that was made public. Heard through some friends who have family working at the local hospital that the victim had power drill inflicted injuries to every joint in his body. Gr Pevin says he'd sexually assaulted the underage daughter of one of the guys who then murdered him. A kebab shop in my hometown has an underground casino and sells food at the back door after closing hours. There's an unexploded nuclear warhead, a hydrogen bomb in a swamp 30 miles from here. And it's been here since the 1960s. And X-200B. Always a crazy rumor until the DOD confirmed it in 2012. Apparently every now and again they come and look for it. It's in Goldsboro, North Carolina. And X-200B. And X-200B. Always a crazy rumor until the DOD confirmed it in 2012. Apparently every now and again they come and look for it. It's in Goldsboro, North Carolina. They recovered most of it. Only one new core remains. It's 200 feet deep. This makes me want to go out there and retrieve it for the sake of having a nuke lol. There are these old abandoned mines. As in mineral mines, think man-made caves in the side of a mountain. near my hometown town where kids used to go to smoke weed and make out before they put metal gates over them. When I was in high school there was this huge thing where a cop went missing. Car and all. While he was on duty. He just didn't show up at shift change. This was before GPS and smartphones etc. People thought he'd been killed by gang members or something. There were no gangs in the town but everyone was convinced that they came down from the nearest big city to do crimes. Eventually they announced. They found him. Accidental death. Very sad. Wife and young kids etc. What wasn't in the news? But everyone knew through word of mouth. He and another cop's wife were having an affair and they were found in his patrol car in one of the McKeert mines. Dead of carbon monoxide poisoning. People in my town want to build a statue of a retro dead man who is seen around town all the time waving at people. He's been doing it for decades. But in reality the guy is really poor and no one helps him with living expenses or basic health dental care. They're basically acting like he's already dead. And aren't trying to raise money to honor him instead of raising money to do something nice for him while he's still alive. Edit. I like that there are dozens of people asking if I'm talking about their town retardee. I guess this kind of token I'm good for enjoying this person. But don't actually care about them is pretty common. Harkens back to the village idiot concept. A bit sad. My hometown has a famous DRG addict, i.e. everyone knows who he is. He's lived there for 70 years and his crimes are town gossip. Most of the time it's small stuff. Stolen bikes, and once a canoe, that he just leaves somewhere. Living in a park where he doesn't feel like going home for a few days. Shit like that. He's mostly seen as a harmless, funny character. His brain is seriously damaged after hard DRG use since his early teens. What is rarely mentioned is that when he still had a house he used to steal dogs and beat them to death in his basement. A girl in my graduating class of 23 kids had a ton of parties at her house. Her mother was only like 15 years older than us and she always also attended these parties. At one of these parties, 2 boys in my class attempted to woo the girl's mother. They ended up actually having a menage a trois with her mom. I moved away from that small town when I was a sophomore but I will never forget that poor girl who had a mom that got tag teamed by some high schoolers. Edit. Sorry guys. I meant menage a cute choice. My years of school French failed me. Also there are a lot of people that have similar stories I guess. This incident took place in a small town in Missouri. Full stop. My small town priest moved parishes to my church a few years ago. Seemed normal yeah? Not until a few months ago when we found out he was sleeping with a married woman from the new parish he was at. The woman had kids that attend the school and her husband eventually found out. Called the church. And he was basically vanished. Found out recently he moved from his first parish because he was sleeping around with parishioners there as well. But they wanted to keep it low key so they just switched his parish. A few months ago there was a brief media kerfuffle in the local papers about someone breaking into a barn and attacking a pony. The account that made it to the papers tactfully omitted the fact that by attack they mean sexual assault. I learned this via a Facebook post shared by a classmate of mine who was friends with the owners of the horse. Edit. I'm not specifying exactly where this took place beyond somewhere in the East Midlands, England. Popular pediatric orthodontist is in jail now for having sex with his high school young college age employees in exchange for painkillers and nitrous. And when it came out he admitted to being high while doing surgery most of the time. So this guy was taking turns on the nitrous tank while taking out my 4 impacted wisdom teeth. But he knows some people. So that story went away very quickly. This was in a small town. Generally run by a half dozen big family names that almost act like redneck mafia families cartels. If you're related to one of those families, you can figuratively get away with murder. And sometimes quite literally. Years back, one of the locals was supposedly out deer hunting and drinking. And noticed a not from around here guy out horse riding in the woods. Just shot him and left him out in the woods to die. Either for shits and giggles, or because the guy was from California. As Al likes to claim, he tends to get drunk and brags about it frequently. So it's more common knowledge than a secret. Nothing has ever been done though, since he's from one of the big families in the area and is related to several officers, a former judge, and a decent chunk of the town. The cops never bothered investigating, just said it was an accidental shooting, and there was no evidence or suspects. Same story they gave when some kids found a couple dead migrant workers in a drainage ditch behind the high school my senior year. Cops just said we'll never know and that was it. I hate that town. Edit. Went back and looked up some old articles to refresh my memory. The guy who got shot was a 20-something ranch hand from another nearby small town. Not from Cali. And apparently there actually was an investigation later. But only after a local author wrote a book about it. Still unsolved. For what it's worth. A guy jumped off a really tall building in my hometown. Ruled as suicide. But rumor has it that he was forced to jump, or physically thrown off the building, due to his dealings with organized crime. That's how mafia work.